Perfect. Good afternoon, everyone. I see some thumbs ups from the technicians, so I can move on. Thank you for staying with us this afternoon for the last session of the first day of the EU Sustainable Energy Week. You're very lucky to have not so many people in the room because the session just before it was unbearable with the heat. So we are packed for 1 hour and a half now. My name is Théo Fievet, and I will coordinate or moderate this session this afternoon. It's organized by the Platform for Electromobility. You can see a logo here on the screen. Maybe to see if you are all awake and hear me well. Who of you already know about the Platform for Electromobility? I see maybe half of you. Okay, so I'll just say a few words about this platform. So we are an informal alliance of experts representing the whole ecosystem of electric mobility and pushing for swift, sustainable, and fair transition to electric mobility. Fair, it's a very important point, and that's where it will, a fair transition, that's where it will keep us busy this afternoon. It's very important for us, and that's why we jumped on the opportunity of this year EU Sustainable Energy Week, because it's focused on skills, and that's one of our main priority. Why priority? For two reasons. First, because we often hear about the disastrous impacts that the shift from ICE to electric transportations will have on the workforce, on the industrial workforce in Europe. So we hear that in public debates, social media, etc. But at the same time, we often see so many different new jobs popping up to create this ecosystem. Tell you a small anecdote, a small story about this, about a colleague that got his first electric car a few months ago. So he got his charging station, home wall box, let's say, installed at home. And on the day when the installers arrived, there were 5 people working for 1 hour. And so he thought, it's crazy. Why do they need so many people for a small wall box? And also, how will they make money out of that if they need so many work? And so we went down the stairs and he asked what was going on. And in fact, there was only one person needed to install the chargers, but the 4 others were there to learn new skills on how to install it, to then obviously deploy all across Europe. So this is to shed some light on this paradox that we designed this session. On this paradox, we also wanted to show you some more slides, but I see first are the people here. So I would first welcome the guest. Patrick, I see you're first on the screen. So if you can come. Patrick Kwiatkowski, you are chair of the Slovak Electric Vehicle Association. Thank you for coming here today. And then we have Ceni Farfi. No, sorry. Is that Farfi? Is that the right name? Perfect, sorry. Ceni, you are a principal at EUSEW. Thank you as well for joining. Then we have Eric Fenton. Eric, you are Executive Vice President of the Software Republic, an initiative by Renault Group. And then we have Federico Fucci. Federico, you are Policy Officer at Europon, Association of Electric Contractors. And then we will have Alex Keynes, who will join us in a few minutes. And Alex is a manager at CINEA, which we don't need to introduce anymore. Before giving you the floor, I would like to give the floor first to the audience with maybe a small Slido. I don't know if the Slido works, if you can show on the screen exactly the QR code. If you can scan the QR code, we'll have just a very short question. I'll give you a few minutes. And I think the question, if I remember correctly, is when you hear about the impact of the electrifications on the industrial workforce in Europe, what are the 3 words that come to your mind? What's come up very quickly like this into your mind? If you could put this in the Slido, then we will have a nice word cloud that should pop up if that works. If someone can nod to see if that works. Perfect, I see some thumbs ups. 3 keywords. What have we got here? You can also participate if you want, if you have your phone with you. Well, maybe I can let you do this while we move on to give you some inspiration. So 2 years ago in 2021, we also did a study to put some data on this paradox I've explained to you, and to see really what would be the impact on the jobs of the electrifications in the automotive sector. And so on this first slide that we took from that study, you can see, I wish I could see you, but it's not there. You can see the big red part of the chart, which means that there will be a bit more than 600,000 jobs lost in some industries of the automotive ecosystem. But at the same time, the big green bar just after that red one shows that there'll be almost 600,000 new jobs, gain jobs in the ecosystem. So if I zoom into these two big bars, we will see the different sectors and how they are impacted. So you can see that there are two big sectors that are mainly impacted, sorry. The first one is the car makers. Here it says OEMs. And the second one is the internal combustion engine focused suppliers, who will be the most impacted by the transition. And then the 7 other sectors are the growing sectors that will go from a few percent to a few 100%. And this is the shift from the top 2 sectors to the bottom 7 sectors that will cover busy today. How do we reskill and upskill the workers from the top 2 to spill over the other ones? I don't know if I can come back to Slido. Maybe it's been fueled a bit. Yeah, here we go. A nice word cloud. So you see some positivity, some negativity, a lot of words, very interesting. That will be used at the end of the talk. We can do a small comparison maybe. Last slide I wanted to show you before giving the floor finally to our speakers is that we also dived into the different degree of transitions of all the workers. I won't go into the details of all these numbers, but you can see that there will be shift within core industries, within the same industry, and then shift between industries, and that's where the skills are the most needed. I think that's it for my introduction. Thank you very much for your attention until here. I want to give the floor maybe first to Eric, because I mentioned the car ecosystem, the car makers being the most impacted by the transition. So maybe you are the most concerned. So if you can tell us a bit more on the Software Republic, if you can keep to 5 minutes as well, that would be nice. Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you. Thank you, everyone. And I'm very happy to discuss this topic here. For me, it's a real pleasure, as I was heading for 7 years the electric vehicle program of Renault Group a few years ago. So I know very well the beginning of the EV story. I'm so happy to see it becoming mainstream today. Now I've joined and created the Software Republic, which is a consortium between the 6 major tech players that you see on the bottom of the slide. So Atos, Dassault Systèmes, Orange, Renault Group, STMicroelectronics, and Thales. The idea beyond this ecosystem was really to create, to capture the fact that the transition in which mobility sector is stepping in through electrification, but also through connectivity and through servicization of the mobility. All those 3 trends are much more software consuming and ecosystem driven. Those are 2 characteristics which are common to all those 3 transitions, and that's why we created an organization reflecting this question of software ecosystem. So Software Republic is here to generate, as a main objective, to generate businesses. This means create product and services, bundling the assets of some of those 6 partners, plus some startups. So we already launched about 5 different businesses. And on top of that, after a few months after starting our I would say operation in 2021, we discover how much the skill and the software skills and the electrification skill was such an issue for all the 6 of us, especially with one very precise angle, which is to demonstrate that doing software in the industry is not can be fun and is not a boring thing. That you don't have to go to the GAFAM necessarily to do fun software. And so we decided to take this challenge on top of our business challenges. And the idea with these 3 programs that you can see here on the screen is to address the question of skills at the different age of life. So it's very simple. The factory is before, I would say, before university, so when you are in high school, basically, or secondary school. Incubator is that when you're in university just before you join your first job. And accelerator is for people like me who are getting old and need to be reskilled during their life. And so we have decided to address those 3 moments of life with very strong programs, including, of course, specific action linked to electromobility, but also other aspects of software. Just if I summarize very quickly, on the factory, the idea is to create more engineers and more people willing to go to the engineering school, especially for women. We know that this number all over Europe is now decreasing, which is for me always a shock, and absolutely no real objective reason to do so. So there is a huge potential of increase of the number of engineering graduate. So that's really the right moment when the students are between 11 and 15 to turn and to change the mindset. So on that front, we have quite a bunch of action with either the students directly or the teachers. When we are in more the recruiting mode, the idea is, so those students have already chosen to be engineers. So now the question is how we keep them in the industry, and especially around electrification, and not going to Facebook or Amazon. And here, I think the big question is to make them touch the complexity and the richness of the challenges of software in this industrial world. So we do that through a specific program. Today we have 700 apprentices across the 6 companies that are joining common event, common program, and creating a kind of common culture. And then for older people, clearly the idea is to widen the offer of reskilling through a communalization of the reskilling offer between our different groups. So those are basically the 3 programs that we are delivering in Software Republic.
Thank you very much, Eric, for his introduction on Software Republic. I think our next speaker is CINEA. CINEA, tell us more about the EDSO and the perspective on this topic.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me today. We are different sectors, so still in the energy, as you would imagine. Oftentimes we are a little bit lost or forgotten friend of energy transition, and that is a pity because the big part is in there and we are needed because everything will be connected to us. So coming again, what the skills mean for the sector, first I will try to say what DSOs are. So we are talking about distribution system operators. EDSO represent the leading ones, so you have to keep in mind they are tradition-minded and narrow-minded in a way, and monopolistic in most of the countries. They have all the countries clients, so our clients, basically, or our members, think they run the country sometimes because they represent all of them. So, and of course, challenges are more. Of course, you have innovation, digitalization, and it's also linked with skills needed for that. So it became really clear that even 10 years ago, I have to say that digitalization will come, and the executives of DSOs started thinking what we should do to cope with the energy transition, so we need to go quickly. So now we hear more, but they started already 10 years ago, and we are doing a lot in terms of digital management skills. They put training in place, they put recruitment processes, they have different profiles now. So we are talking about data analyst, grid management, grid cybersecurity manager or analyst, or kind of sometimes specialists on a specific field. So all these kind of profiles, they were never there before. So they are trying really to change also the recruitment process, the profiles they are looking for. And so there is a lot happening in terms of how we engage and how we are trying to catch up with the transition. Now, what you see on the screen is something that EDSO members do as part of a project, which is called EDI. EDI is very interesting. It's really capturing exactly what is happening right now in the energy transition. It's called Education for Digitalization of Energy. It's been there for quite some time, and very unfortunately will end by end year 2023. Nevertheless, there is still something in the pipeline. It's making an alliance for digital skills in the future, so stay tuned for that. So basically, under this EDI, which I have different 16 partners and 5 DSOs included in there, they have 16 countries involved in the process. So there are universities there, DSOs, they are trying, municipalities, they are trying really to capture a little bit what's going on in the field. It's not just DSO related, but really when you have to upgrade the grid, you have to talk to local communities. You have to talk to charging operators. You need to know where to put your strengths. It's not just one win-win situation. So what they did, they just took a survey sometime back 2020, during COVID time actually, not maybe the best, but it's interesting because they took some skills and they did the coverage by sector. And when you see the gap, the lowest coverage level on every skill set, which is data or management or configuration and platform, analytic methods, is in the power sector. It looks like heating and cooling has the highest level of coverage, which is really safer in that regard. And the explanation behind the data was that it's so much to cover. Like, it's really like we are talking about 50 million electric vehicles by 2035, only that. Then you are speaking about around 50 million heat pumps connected to the grid as well. So you would imagine the distributors, they just find themselves like overwhelmed with all these skills they need to take into account for the grid to be upgraded, for the grid to be managed, to be ready for and fit for purpose. So they said because there is so much connection and renewables to be expected, they are struggling. So that is explaining why the skills are not at the level they should be. And then the second kind of exercise they did in the next slide, you will see that they just did another kind of logic about, now it's not about sectors, but it's type of operators within the same sector. So you have generators, aggregators, retailers, you have manufacturers, and you will see quite amazingly the manufacturers lack the skills. So it is expected, well, the survey shows it's 49% not covered all the skills. And the manufacturers work quite closely with the DSOs, because if you don't have the technology there, whatever you would like to like upgrade the skills, reskill the people, if the technology is not there, it's not going to happen. If you want to change the buildings, or if you want to put charging points, if you have no manufacturers with the equipment to make it available, then it will be challenging also in terms of DSOs to capture that kind of innovation or kind of opportunity. And when it comes to service providers, the smallest gap, it was at least evaluated like that, which is quite surprising. And the lowest coverage level, it was generation and retailers. So still we see that the skills were not there yet by the time, and things have not improved quite much, although there is a tendency to capture and to do the training that I mentioned at the beginning. So now DSOs are putting KPIs in place. But one thing that it came clear from our membership when you ask them, it's just the aging skill force that they have in place. Most of the people working engineers are close to retirement or they have retired. And the fact that when I asked one member said, no, forget CINEA, I mean, I shy away when there is opportunity for training in my company because of my age. And I say exactly what you said. There is an opportunity for your age as well, because otherwise we just lose the expertise of the people. So there is so much out there about the distribution. I would say we are catching up. It's a big momentum for us. Many things are going, all the policies we follow are going greener, therefore we need to match the expectations.
Thank you, Tseni. So electrification of cars is not the only challenge ahead of you. Then I turn to Federico. Federico, related to the EDS, to DSOs, but can you tell us more about your organization and your assessment of the challenges?
Yeah, so I work for Europon, so this is the European Association of Electrical Contractors. And there's a lot there on that slide, but there's really 3 points I wanted to make today. And maybe starting with who you are, electrical contractors. And in the kind of EV electrification segment, you usually think about installers, right? Installers of charge points. But we see ourselves moving more and more towards electrical integrators, right? Rather than installers, because we see that there's more and more integration of transport with energy, and this all happens also in buildings where you can have your electric vehicle charging with your on-site solar installation. And so we see that there's really a shift in our membership from installer to integrator, and that also has implication for skills. So that's maybe the first thing I needed to say to kind of set the scene. The second thing I wanted to really highlight, and I think that's really important because we're here talking about skills. I think it's one of the main themes here at the EUSEW this year. We have the Year of Skills at EU level happening. They have the Pact for Skills. So there's a lot of skills in a certain way. We've been working on this since 2019. There's never been that much skills in EU energy policy. But I think the missing piece here is really the workforce, right? We need upskilling, we need more skills, but we need more people, right? We need to increase our workforce, and that's really maybe also the top priority for our memberships, is to increase the workforce. Obviously equip this workforce with the right skills, but that's really maybe the first thing I wanted to say also with regard to this kind of Year of Skills and all of these impetus behind this, and kind of behind putting people kind of at the center of the energy transition. So increasing the workforce means, starting earlier with the pipeline of workers, so addressing people who are not in the job market yet, and making sure that they know, or they can find our sectors attractive, right? Anything related to the energy transition should become attractive as it isn't. There's obviously reskilling of people. That's you take someone who is on the job market, or is working maybe in a sector that stands to lose workers in the energy transition process, and reskill it towards something cleaner. And then obviously we have upskilling. That's really important as well for the existing workforce. But I would say that comes third, in our opinion. So that was the second point I wanted to make. And then finally, the third main message I wanted to put out there is that we need fully qualified workers, fully qualified integrators who can address the challenges that we see today. So why do I say this? Because there's a lot of pressure, I think, especially in the few years ahead, to roll out all of these clean energy technologies that we're talking about. I mean, we're here today talking about e-mobility, about EV charging for us, but the same goes for solar PV, for heat pumps, for automation systems, and these are really, and these all need to work together, right? So you need people who are fully qualified, but with this pressure to roll out all of these technologies, we hear sometimes from policymakers, from certain industry players that we should implement short trainings, take people who are maybe unemployed, put them through a course, 1-2 weeks, and then they can be on the field installing stuff. Well, we don't see it that way, because of the need for integration. First, calls for a fuller skill set. There's also a very important element of safety. Electrical safety is something really dear to us as well, and we kind of fear that having unqualified operatives or sub-qualified operatives will endanger consumers, basically, because of lack of safety of the installation. And and then the consumers, I think, this is also very important for consumers, because so our members, they go to people's homes, they're in touch with them, and there is an increasing demand from consumers for EV chargers, for PV systems. We've seen it in the past year with the Russian gas prices, and just also with a regulatory push for this. And consumers can be quite creative, or not necessarily aware of the safety aspects of installations. And this is something that is really important to understand, and that it's really so important that consumers can be accompanied through this transition by fully qualified people who know how to advise them and how to do this. And I think I have a next slide that kind of illustrates this. And I like this picture because I took it in my neighborhood in Brussels just a couple years ago, and just illustrating how creative consumers can be. Because you see here someone, an EV user, who ran his charging cable from his first floor apartment to his EV over the sidewalk. And so I would say that's quite creative, points for that, but it's quite unsafe, and it's quite, you can see what happens when consumers are left on their own. So I would really stress that it's important to have fully qualified people who can assist them. And obviously, since I can't have a slide with only a picture, I had to fill it with a lot of more stuff here. And but really, it can be summed up by 2 words. It's gap assessment. That's maybe the first policy recommendation that I would say is important and should be implemented at EU level and at member state level. Is look at how many people you have to roll out the EV chargers in this case, but this can be also relevant for other technologies. See how many people you have, see how many people you need with regard to your targets for 2030, for later. And that gap assessment can be should be the starting point of proper action on skills in the workforce.
Thank you.
I'll stop here, I won't be into
Thank you, Federico. I have a few questions for you after, so you can go back to this. Patrick now, the fourth speaker. Floor is yours. 5 minutes will be perfect.
Thank you, Theo. Maybe I will start with the first slide, which you will not show right now, but we didn't speak about, and that's the 3 main terms or words that you were asking. What are the really reflective, or what are the important for this transformation? And I saw a big one was challenge, and the other one was positive. I don't know if I should speak about challenge or the positive in which order, but let me first start with the challenges. If you just give me the next slide.
Wait.
Yeah. I come from the Central Eastern Europe, which is, by the way, the hub for manufacturing of automotive and battery industry. I'm not sure whether you ever realized, but we actually make a lot of cars. Just Slovakia alone makes 1 million cars out of 10 million which are sold every year in Europe. And that's the biggest per capita producer in the world. And if you add up Czech Republic, which is the neighboring country to the west, that's another million, which is again, global number 2 per capita producer. And CE countries actually make another 2 countries make it to global 10, Romania and Slovenia. And adding to this is actually battery industry, where we speak about Poland and Hungary, the currently hubs for battery production, global 2 and global 4. So we are very much dependent on automotive and on this transformation, and this is what I would call a challenge. We saw first layoffs in the automotive, obviously due to efficiency. EVs are more efficient to produce than combustion engines. But if you change the slide, I can speak also about risks. There are a couple of studies that were developed for this topic. For Slovakia, for example, we actually are facing the layoffs at the level of 80,000 or more than 80,000 jobs out of 300,000, which is tremendous change. If we wouldn't actually transform the industry, obviously, as we are doing a lot of GDP, that would mean even up to 10% of the GDP. I would use the same study as you did for Czechia from BCG, which actually faces the same kind of challenge. They are somehow they might be even or break even with some 5,000 jobs, in plus if they do it everything if they do everything in a correct way. The Polish market faces the same kind of challenge because they would lose approximately 7,000 jobs by just by doing it not correctly or as a base scenario. Maybe I would just provide you some solution. Everybody talks about the battery industry and battery value chain. Obviously, everybody wants to attract the battery value chain. So when we speak about these countries, Slovakia would need 2 gigafactories of batteries every year as of 2035, which would equal to 80 gigawatt hours per year. Same in Czech Republic, about 50 gigawatt hours per year, which makes obviously a big opportunity. And here I would come to the word positive, because if we do it right, we can do it in a positive way, and we can earn from this transformation. I deliberately didn't show the slide with the battery cell manufacturing, because everybody wants battery cell manufacturing, Spain, everybody. But let's look at the next phase of the battery value chain, the battery assembly, battery packs. And from the number of the projects and the plants, you can see that already today the CE countries are the hub for battery assembly lines or battery assembly plants. So this would be a great opportunity, which could make the whole transformation positive in the end phase.
Thank you, Patrick, for this assessment of the Central and Eastern European perspective and solutions forward. So we saw some different sectors, some different regions. So now I want to give the floor to Alex for maybe the NGO perspective on the topic. Alex, welcome. I didn't have time to introduce you. So, Clean Vehicle Manager at Transport and Environment, and thank you for making it just on time.
Yeah. So yeah, firstly, apologies for my rude entrance. I was travelling from abroad, and inevitably my travel was delayed. So apologies for that. So yeah, I'll just wait.
I don't find the slides.
Yeah, no worries.
I don't know where they are, your slides.
That's me.
Yeah, they're lost.
Lost in the exchanges of emails.
But I can maybe just start anyway. So obviously, as an NGO, for those of you who don't know Transport Environment, we are Europe's largest clean transport NGO. Our vision is basically to transition quickly towards a zero-emission mobility system. So obviously, within that vision, obviously electric vehicles, 100% zero-emission vehicles are obviously a key part of that. So when it comes to skills and the workforce, we maybe don't speak with the same credibility that a private sector organisation or company who is actually managing this transition does. But for us, it's important because obviously we're calling for this transition. It's our day-to-day work that we are telling policymakers and companies, you need to do this transition, you need to do it quickly. So for us, it's key part of our credibility that we engage in this question about skills and about jobs. So for that reason, that's what we've been doing as Transport and Environment. I did have a slide. I don't know if they've been lost completely or.
Let's try again, but.
There's been.
No, sorry for that.
That's okay. I'll talk you through the slides. The first one, I think, actually was overlapping a bit with what Theo has already presented, even though I wasn't here, around this study from Boston Consulting Group. So we got involved as Transport Environment in this study. We thought it was a really important thing that we needed to show. Okay, what impact is this transition going to have on jobs, and obviously the main. Is this it? No. The main finding, obviously, that is there is going to be enough jobs to more or less offset the jobs we are going to see, job losses. Sorry, we're going to see in the traditional ICE focused sector, because of course we have to be honest about that as well. So really the key challenge, that obviously the conclusion of this report was that this is the skills, making sure that the workers have the right skills for these new jobs. And I think this was kind of been touched upon already, that maybe this isn't the case and there's a bit of a shortfall or a gap in terms of the skills that European workers have. An interesting anecdote that our executive director had when speaking to Northvolt, the Swedish battery manufacturer, cell producer, when they first set up tried to set up in the EU, was that there was just absolutely no European trained battery chemists. So they had to hire firstly people from Asia. So I mean, this kind of underscored how tricky it would be to kind of quickly scale up the skills that European workers needed to make that transition and make sure there was a just transition. So I think that's a key part of what we've worked on, and happy to answer some questions around this later and continue the discussion. The second slide I had was also actually taken from a previous study that Boston Consulting Group did before this study that Theo presented earlier, where they already looked into because there's this often cited, and I was going to say claim, but it is a fact, of course, that battery electric vehicles are much simpler to produce and they have fewer components. The simplistic way you're looking at this is obviously that you get a significant amount of job losses that come from the transition to electric vehicles. But if you actually look at all of the new components that you have in an electric vehicle, which are not necessarily produced and made in the traditional automotive sector, our view of what the traditional automotive sector is, then of course you see significant job losses. But actually, if you look at all of the new components, which I had a very, very nice design slide to show this. If you look at kind of battery, power electronics, all these kind of new things, then actually the overall labour demand for a BEV versus an ICE is actually almost 1-to-1. This Boston Consulting Group study before showed it was not, if you assume an ICE car is 100%, then the BEV is actually 99%. So really a much smaller drop-off than is often cited in kind of these studies and the general media discussion around this. And then the final slide I had was around recommendations. Happy to go into some more details around this as well in the discussion. But as part of our, let's say, wanting to work and be credible on this question as an NGO, obviously we've engaged with policymakers on this as well. We haven't just said go for 100% zero-emission vehicles. We have said that, but we wanted to engage also on the question of just transition and what the policymakers need to do for workers and for companies that are making that transition. And we engaged with associations that we often don't agree with. So with ASEA, with CLEPA. Also with working very closely with trade unions, we came together with some other stakeholders as well to kind of have some common policy messages on what policymakers needed to think about for a just transition in the automotive sector. Of course, we have the just transition policy framework for the coal regions, but not for the automotive regions, and we think that's an important missing piece of the policy jigsaw. So things like mapping the employment impacts of what's coming, making sure that companies and regional governments, national governments are actually prepared for this transition, that they are putting in place plans to transition companies and workforces. And of course, money. Transitions cost money, so we need to be honest about that. And if the money is spent wisely at the start, it's going to save a lot of money down the line, rather than propping up kind of workers in jobs that have no future. So yeah, I'll leave it there, and we can discuss in more detail.
Yeah,
later.
perfect.
Yeah.
No, but what would you answer then to the people who ask, is e-mobility going to be a game changer or a job killer for the auto industry? That's where I started my introduction from.
Yeah. So I think, to kind of build on what I was saying earlier, it looks a little bit. So it's clearly a game changer. I mean, that's without a doubt, and we need to be honest about that. That it's the biggest. It's the biggest challenge that the automotive sector has faced. But I mean, they are doing it. I mean, we see, a lot of the scare stories that came about how this was not going to be possible when it would be a job killer. When we had a couple of car CO2 standards revisions back. And now that hasn't come to pass, as we said it wouldn't. Yeah, I think obviously, is it going to be a job killer? No, there's numbers out there which shows it's not going to be, and it depends how you look at the automotive ecosystem. If you look at engines and ICE cars, of course it's going to be a big job loss, a job killer. But we shouldn't be looking at just that traditional automotive sector. We need to look at the ecosystem and charging infrastructure,
why we invited them.
and battery makers and also the suppliers as well. They make a lot of parts that go in electric vehicles as well. So as we know, there are going to be plenty of jobs to offset these job losses. And I think maybe just one thing, maybe that's often bundled up a bit in the kind of in the narrative around job losses, which we need to avoid, and is that job losses that will come and are coming from automation, digitalization, outsourcing, competitiveness issues, mergers and acquisitions. That's always bundled up into this thing of like, oh, EVs are a job killer. Actually, there's loads of different forces at play, and that needs to be recognised as well. And I think, the example of Ford, there was a lot of media attention around Ford announcing job losses in Europe, and I feel like they slightly disingenuously packaged it up as in, oh, it's because we're being so ambitious on EVs. When actually, if you look into the detail of why Ford is cutting jobs, it's much more complicated than that. They, and not to say, this is not me casting any aspersions on the company, but it's not just about, it's hardly about electric vehicles. They have made business decisions to outsource the use of technology on their EVs to use Volkswagen VW MEB platform technology, also to outsource a lot of this production in the US. And they, like other car companies, are moving away from mass market, high volume, low profit cars to lower volume, higher profit cars, which also brings, fewer jobs as well. So these are business decisions that have been made, not necessarily linked with electrification.
Sometimes it's confused in the public debate. One more question for you before I go back into the other panelists. So does that mean it would be maybe safer or better for economic or social outcome to maybe dial down in our ambition on EVs?
Yeah, I guess you know what I'm going to say. Obviously, we don't think that. I think there's been that narrative, I think, is now starting to go away or to die down, because we have heard that, we need to slow down the transitions for socio-economic reasons. And we heard this discussion around plug-in hybrids as well. Plug-in hybrids with a bridging technology. I think we put out a lot of arguments to say why plug-in hybrids were a bad idea for climate and air pollution, which they are. And I think, now we need to have a more sensible discussion around Europe and European companies and workers being in a really highly competitive race to capture the new value chain for the EV ecosystem. And that is the only future. We shouldn't be wasting time on non-solutions like fuels, like e-fuels in cars and vans and heavy-duty trucks, by any kind of fuels, and slowing down the transition, because the future, I think, is only going to be for cars, vans, trucks, for road transport, is only going to be battery powered. And if we kind of bury heads in the sand, then we're just going to lose more time and lose the future EV value chain there. And the biggest threat to jobs and workers here is that we start importing all of these products in the future. That all of the things that we need for this EV ecosystem are made, and all the technology and policies are set there, in China, in the US, and California. So that's
opening a lot of different doors and a lot of questions, but I have to ask also a question to other panelists. Maybe before I go back as well, I want to say that you can also go on Slido to ask your own questions. We've got a few prepared here, but make sure to have your own ready for a few minutes from now. I think it's possible, right, to add a question on Slido. Yeah, I see some tops. Coming back to you, Eric. We also mentioned, obviously, the automotive sector as the most impacted, but with this software republic, clearly we are in front of a new ecosystem, a new format, a new industry. So how do you meet with this new initiative? How do you meet the new and increasing needs for skills in the automotive sector? Can you tell us more about this?
Yeah, maybe I can go a bit in the detail of each of the three pillars I just mentioned at the beginning. To start by the end, I think this question of reskilling is at the heart of all the graph we have seen with plus bar and minus bar and making a total which is close to zero, but then with a big change, and behind that there are people that are not going to change immediately if we don't bring them solution to reskill. And I think from this reskilling point of view, we are really at the beginning, and it's a new habit for a lot of people. What we can see is that there are a lot of bridges now coming from the IT world to the OT world. So the people working really on IT system now working on the car, and this bridge is quite easy to cross when you have the right skill. For example, on cyber, it's clearly one of the skill, and this is impacting also the charging station and the grid now, because clearly there we have a lot of cyber issues. So that's one of the first topic where we started to open our reskilling program and to share it among the different partners. By the way, behind that there is also a question of sovereignty, because on those reskilling program or certification program, most of the time you have to use US-based certification bodies, which I think is not the right answer. So we are also trying to recover some of the sovereignty on this certification in Europe. If I'm going in the middle and the second pillar of young engineers, I think for them the main message and that we are showing is that the complexity of working in an industrial environment, and especially on board of the car or on board on any kind of grid, but not in the cloud, is bringing additional fun and additional complexity to the job, because you have much more constraint in terms of energy consumption, in terms of GPU, in terms of cyber, etc., that you can have when you're purely in the cloud. So that's the type of message that we are conveying to them, to show the interest and demonstrate that it's worth transitioning to, I would say, industrial sector, whether we're talking about the integration of charger, and it will be more and more a job of integration. I agree when V2G pops in the coming weeks or months, but also in the grid or wherever. And when I'm talking about the young talent, I think that's a real common cause that we have to tackle together, because the problem we have today are also caused because on this skilled planning we didn't anticipate with the younger generation 10, 15 years ago. So that's our responsibility, I think, to take the topic today. Of course, there is not a return on investment in 1 year, that's for sure. But that's why bundling our forces and sharing the initiative in this consortium is a very relevant way to address that.
Yeah, making the links that are not usually no links needed in the old ecosystem, and now it's very different. You mentioned all these people behind all these bars, and a lot of these people are in Central and Eastern Europe. So maybe I want to ask you, Patrick, is there any other initiative or tools, innovative ones, that you want to talk about that are happening in Central and Eastern Europe that help you promote reskilling and upskilling?
Skills are and talent are that's actually crucial word. I just give you another anecdote or another fact, and I will take Poland as a good example because they are big, of course, and their numbers actually impress people. So there are 1,200,000 heavy-duty vehicles in Poland. They are actually the biggest operator of heavy-duty vehicles and trucks in Europe. And just imagine when they are not transforming, or when they will not transform right, they will lose a lot of jobs, not just because of the transition in the plants will go into the electric vehicles, but because of users will go towards electric vehicles. And now we don't talk about passenger cars. I mean, that's the transition can be fast, slow, but like this will affect 1 million jobs directly operating the vehicles. And now, just bridging to your question, If you want to employ these people, you either do it fast with the transition, so you actually need to transform and you need to start using the electric trucks in Poland. By the way, you need to build 190 ultra-fast charging hubs for trucks in Poland, which is great opportunity for the installers, for distribution grid upgrades. So we don't have to talk about the automotive and the plants only, and just to move this from the engine to batteries, for example, we can talk about different sectors where these people can get jobs. I would use here one example, European Battery Academy, which was recently started in Poland, jointly with our friends from PSPA, and we contributed to this. This is actually a good example how we could do the transition and reskilling or upskilling, because obviously there are not enough people in battery sector who would be ready to skip to transit from engines to batteries. I'm not sure whether this operation is successful yet, but I can give you an example. When we counted how many chemical engineers we produce a year in Slovakia, we counted like several tens of chemical engineers coming every year from the schools. And now we don't talk about the battery engineers, we talk about all chemical engineers for plastics, for everything, right? And when we speak about battery cell production, we speak about thousands of workers, out of that hundreds of engineers. So if I bridge to the solution, so Battery Academy, you need to retrain and do the upskilling of thousands of potential workforce for the future battery factories. So I would say one of the solutions is the operation or the projects like Battery Academy, which hopefully will be scaled up and will take off very fast in the Central Eastern Europe.
Thank you, Patrick. Beyond auto industry, maybe CINEA, can you tell us more about the in terms of workforce and the grid adaptations? How do DSOs prepare for this increase in demand in terms of workforce?
Yeah, sure. I would join my colleagues in that, like energy transition is starting. The short answer, what you ask, will be like DSOs have been cooking green with digital equipment. So let's put it like that. That's exactly what is happening. So what I mean by that, like probably you have here in the room or even you as panelists about smart metering. And smart metering in some countries is quite advanced, that they have the second or third generation, and in some other countries it's completely disparate, they don't have none. And that entails another kind of logic, because what's happening, if you want to build an EV charging point, 100 by a local station, I don't know, in a certain area, then nobody's going anymore, like energy. Engineers, they're supposed to be before, like 10 years before, to going and checking whether the streets have capacity, what are the habits of the inhabitants, what's going on. Basically, the smart meters allow them to do the job. But yeah, they have to be behind the screen to check all the data and to make the calculation analytics and to say to the commune or to the municipality, look, and to the charge point operators, like, if you want to build in 5 next years 100 charge point, here it's not going to happen because it shows a dynamic map where via the smart metering that the habits and the capacity is just out. So you have to find another location. It can be 2 streets away, it can be in another city. So this is one thing that we usually do, and it has already upgraded a lot of skills for people to kind of manage that challenge. The second one is artificial intelligence. So basically, again, the engineers are not going to see whether the network has to be replaced, cables, substation, but they just send the drones, which is being a bit contested by the European Parliament, I have to say, because they say it's a critical infrastructure, what are you doing? Like, you cannot just send drones over the people's building and then just see whether the network is still there or you have to replace it or whatever. Nevertheless, for us it's a good news because we go and check and then we replace the aging infrastructure. So, of course, this needs a lot of skills and investment. So basically a study, which is not Boston, but it's Deloitte, done in Spain, just showed that only the distribution system operators need to have 400 billion euros investments by 2050. And we don't know how that's going to happen, but 170 billion will be only for skills. So we are happy that the Commission took over, like this year, Pact for Skills. People think about it, executives take the matters about it, because it's not going to happen otherwise. So I have to say that the investment have to be there. It's a cost.
Yeah.
Yeah, in a way. So.
Yeah. So funds, money, and AI is already happening in this sector. Federico, on the electric contracting industry, I know you have ongoing projects on skills. Can you tell us more about them and maybe some preliminary results?
Yeah, so we actually, as your partner, are involved in a project with some funding from the Erasmus Plus program to work out European qualifications framework for electrical skills. So what is that? It's basically just some kind of way that people from one country can assess the skills of someone in another and see if that matches the skills in this first country. So that started fairly recently, and but there's one thing really I think is insightful for this conversation that we're having today, is that within this project we took this opportunity to survey electrical contracting companies and some also associations in our kind of sector on the skills needs, on what is really important to them, and as I mentioned earlier, our members are this kind of integrator job now, and so they work with very different various technologies, all of which require installers, PV heat pumps, EV charging. But still, EV charging and the skill to install EV chargers was one of the top skills in demand, right? And so that really made it concrete for us that because our members, when we talked to our members, I think last year we had a bit of a discussion on this, and it came out that in every single country, the unemployment rate was about 1%, so basically non-existent, right? And you need electrical contractors or installers or integrators for a lot of things, but still EV charging was amongst the top. And very interestingly as well, it was among the top skills was EV charging, but there was also PV installation and system integration. So that's really kind of arcing back to what I was saying at the beginning during the slides, and we didn't tweak the survey results to match our policy asks. I want to add, it's just confirming what I mentioned earlier, is that it's really for us the skill and the trend going forward is this integration, is having all of these skills to tackle all of these technologies, but then bringing them together. And that requires obviously fully qualified people, but maybe something I didn't mention is also more digital skills as well, because integrations means a certain level of automation, a certain level of programming. So I think that was quite insightful, and for us this survey was also an opportunity to again confirm this trend that we're seeing. And also something else that came up is something that, again, we hear about, but that, cost of training is an obstacle. So so there is some funding available, but I feel like it's never enough, and you can see that still with it today, cost of training, both in terms of financial costs, but also the time spent is a bit of a constraint. So there is funding available, but it's not reaching the people that need it. And so that's maybe the last bit of insight, I think, from the survey that I think we can, I'm happy to have the platform to share.
That's something we often hear indeed, yeah. But you mentioned the quantity of workers also is very important. And how do you increase this pipeline of workers towards the industry?
So I use this formulation, pipeline of workers, because it's something we hear a bit, and it's a bit crude, but because I'm thinking about our youth, basically, and about one of maybe the major obstacle to having the, as mentioned, quantity of people, quantity of integrators around, is that there's an issue with the attractiveness of technical education, technical careers, and that's quite difficult to fix, because it's not something that you have one one policy that can fix it. You don't have one target that will fix it. You need to address the youth from a very early age. You need to address the parents who will have big decision on what the students or what their children do. You need to address specifically girls, to address the gender dimension, which is really a big issue and is something that will go a long way towards fixing also the sort of quantity of workers that we want. And so this is really something that we've been calling for a while. As I mentioned, it's not easy because we're working at EU level. The EU is not necessarily, it doesn't have its hands everywhere it needs. So there's also a big role to play for member states to have, attractiveness campaigns. Funny enough, yesterday or very recently, there's a French MP. I was watching his interview, and he was saying, we have ad campaigns or commercials for people to join the army. Come and defend your country. That's you'll make a big impact. He was saying, scrap that. You need people. You need ads to say, join the construction industry. You'll save the planet. Right? And so I think this is really, I was happy to hear it because this is kind of what we've been saying. I think this is something that that we need to act on it. It's not easy, as I mentioned, but and we need to act on it now because obviously, if you address children or students or prospective students, it takes some time to have the benefits, right? So, but it's I think it's a critical action to take, and this should be this is better done obviously at member state level, right? Because we don't have a single EU media system to roll out communication campaigns, but the EU can have a role providing an impetus there. And there are references to it in some EU legislation, such as the Energy Efficiency Directive. I think the Net Zero Industry Act also has a reference to it in its proposal. So I hope that's something we'll see going forward to address this pipeline issue.
Sounds like a big political program. Good luck on that one. I've got more questions for you, but maybe I want to have a look at the Slido because we're already only 25 minutes to the close of the station. So I don't know if you can put the Slido on one of the screen or the questions that are being asked, if any. We've got one. So let's take it, I suppose. What will the impact of the AFIR be on the skills and jobs needed to install the infrastructure? And for EDSO, how are your members preparing for this one? So maybe Tseni, if you want to back to this one?
Yeah, sure. So AFIR is something that is in our kind of monitor. We just monitor the file. We have been quite active on that, but also very conscious about the fact that we need to be careful about the optimization of the charging points and infrastructures when it comes to distribution. Again, I said grids are there to accommodate, otherwise that already what's happening in EV charging sector would not be possible. Now the impact, the way we see it, it's like different kind of facets. The first is private or public, depending on the spaces that you have availability in public spaces. So we want to make sure that for each public space there is a limitation of charging points in order not to overwhelm the grid. So you have to prevent a blackout, basically. Then one thing that we also kind of advocated with the rapporteur of the file was the fact that make batteries a little bit more performant, so you need less charging points. Therefore, everything is meant in such a way that has less inconvenience for the grid. And I would say, are we ready to accommodate all the EV charging upcoming? Maybe yes, maybe no. There is a problem of congestion. There is something we should not forget. In some countries, they are not coping quite well. So at some point, they just ended up, just to give the example of the Netherlands, making these connection points first come, first served basis, which looks a little bit like a party invitation, and then you say, if you are not quick enough, you cannot be connected. And that is a bit dangerous because the case ended up being in the court, basically, and saying you cannot just prevent people to be connected, whether they have the facilities there. So this is where we stand. We will see how the evolution of AFIR will go, but yeah.
Thank you, Tseni. I like the other question here as well. What does Tseni think that should be done to make the shift into the EU auto industry fair and smooth transitions? We're here organized by in the EU Sustainability organized by the Commission. So we're also talking policies and what should be in the next, maybe the next program of the next Commission. So maybe Alex, can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. So as I kind of touched on in my introductory remarks, we engage on this as CINEA because we think it's important to not forget and be honest about the challenges. And obviously we've discussed already today a lot of the challenges that the companies that are going to be implementing this transition are dealing with. And many companies and organizations don't actually have strategic plans in place for the changes that are coming. Lots do, which is really good. And many regional and national governments don't have the plans either. So we think that there does need to be an EU legal framework in place, a just transition for the automotive sector, whatever you want to call it, that can guide companies and governments through this, because it's not easy, clearly. And I touched on it before, but I think we see several elements to this that the EU can be playing a role, because clearly a lot of this is obviously done at national level. But we want to also avoid a situation where governments with the most money can just deal with this very easily and others don't. But one thing I think is mapping the employment impacts very, very clearly. So a granular mapping at company, regional, national level. What's the effective skills intelligence that we have? What skills will be needed, and what's the skill set lacking, and things like this. We've heard it all already from the other panelists about what the challenges they see, but I think something like this can help. I think the social element is really key as well. So transition planning, social dialogue. So trade unions obviously calling for this, understandably, and we support their calls on this. That actually a central part of this whole legal framework should be rights for workers and rights for trade unions to actually have a voice in this transition. And I think they've shown that in examples where there has been, at times painful transitions being made, that trade unions play a very, very important and not at all a blocking role in this transition. And so, things like negotiated transition plans, I think should be legally protected and things like this. And then as well, obviously money as well. I don't want to get into a big discussion around where this money is going to come from. I think we seem to have with every single file now coming that there's a pot of money promised, but where's it going to come from? I think clearly there's money available that can be reallocated from pots, underused funds in different money pots out there. The social climate fund could be something that we can see used for this kind of thing. Upskilling, active labour market policies, where actually some regions, don't have the money or the resources in government available to do this. But also, I think maybe just to touch on one thing, it doesn't have to be, and it's not going to be possible, by the way, that someone who's leaving a job in making an engine or part of an engine, or in a foundry or something that's closing, it's not going to be possible. It's not going to be possible to find them all a job in a battery pack assembly plant or making charging infrastructure. A lot of these people, I think part of this is going to be active labour market policies in kind of early retirement and money available for these people, clearly. Management of the labour force in general. But also some of these people maybe find a job in a completely different sector, and I think actually it's not for us to discuss what sector that could be, but it doesn't have to be a battery cell factory or whatever. There's very good examples of successful transitions that have been made. At the Limburg region, for example, who did a coal transition away from coal, and now the region, because of in some cases, kind of clever strategic planning with money being used, that have different sectors there, creative sectors, technology, nothing to do with energy or mobility, but workers there have well-paid jobs in completely different sectors. So I think that's also cross-sectoral approach is also important.
Crossing sectors, linking sectors is the theme of the day. Any reactions? Maybe I don't want to jump from question to questions. Maybe if you want to react, you just let me know. So don't see any reaction. So let's go to the next one. Maybe if the EU lacks competency on educations, what action do companies associations think we can target and encourage at national level? So the question of national level is very important. We're here talking in Brussels at European level, but most of the things done at national level. Maybe in Slovakia level, what do you think is doable?
Well, first of all, awareness, because I'm not sure that politicians are aware of.
Awareness,
I mean, they are absolutely not aware of the risks and challenges, and it's the life cycle of a politician, 4 years, and then hopefully re-elected. It's out of the scope. Education itself is actually something which is long term, not even transition of education. So awareness, and the studies which we all actually quoted already, BCG. To be aware of the risks and the scale of the risk is the first step. Then, we already touched upon that programs to do the upskilling and reskilling, which costs money. And I like the idea of Just Transition Fund for automotive regions, because you need to pick the region which might be affected, and then just start active measures to work with these workers which might be at risk. So, but this is actually a hard one. I mean, that's the answer is the entire policy and the policy document of the government, which is, it can be for a long-term transition. So, but what we can do, build the awareness. That's for sure.
Yeah. And this kind of session is also what we are aiming for. Any other reaction for the national perspective, or we can move to the next question? Then the next one is for you, Eric, I believe, on the Software Republic. Is a native functioning of Software Republic in a business ecosystem an asset for pooling skills development and training programs? I think it means like a cooperation maybe between the six partners. It's more about this cooperation and how it helps you create the right training programs.
Yeah, I think the business and training approach are very consistent, and I don't oppose them. Like training is for HR people and business is for business people. So, and I see the two sides of the coin. The first one is, of course, more you're going into software production. Clearly, the number of headcount you have today, capable of coding, capable of delivering DevOps or whatever, is clearly your turnover and your throughput. So several members of Software Republic are in this scheme that one trained staff means additional activity. So the link with business in that way is quite clear. The link in the other way is also clear, even if you need to rethink a bit the training, not the traditional way. The traditional way is you need a bunch of money, you will make a tender, then you will have universities or private teaching companies which will answer, and then you will pay them to train. That's one way, and I think in Software Republic we are trying to engage in a bit different way. The idea first is that we have a lot of startup schools and startup entity. We are collaborating in, I will give French example, I have the name in mind, but on cyber with École 2600, which is a new school just started a few years ago, and now it's becoming one of the leading cyber school in France. So there are people using and disrupting somehow the training and the reskilling business in a new business model. Even for us in large companies, I feel we can change a bit the story. First, because in most cases we have experts that can train, and the question is how you valorize them, how you use them to make the training in a way that they will feel rewarded, both financially and emotionally. And on the other hand, the way to help you reduce the cost, because of course, if you use internal resources, it's always cheaper than buying some external teacher. So that's really something we are pushing in the business model of training inside Software Republic, is not to be in a pure supplier relationship, supplier-customer relationship, but invent new way of making the business training viable.
And looking at the last question, they talk about young children, schools. Is this something you're tackling, or you're only tackling
adults?
No, clearly we are starting in school, starting 10, 11 years old, and especially girls. Clearly that's, for me, for us, the easiest potential we have just there, because the ratio of women in tech is just reducing over time, which is absolutely difficult to understand in the evolution of our societies. So clearly there is potential, and one of the main actions in this field is to demonstrate by example, either example of people, and clearly the role model is key. And so we have in our 6 companies major tech women which are the cutting edge of the tech, and that can become role model for younger girls. But we also need to demonstrate them that there is fun, and there is a variety in the tech job that can be attractive, whatever the girls' mindset is.
Okay, so also focus on kids and also on girls and women. Still on that question of remaining here, Federico, you also mentioned how important it is to act from the young age. Do you want to react, or you already said everything?
No, I think the main thing, I'm looking at the question as well, is there a disconnect here? I would say there's a bit of a disconnect between what goes on at the earlier stages with regard to the place of technical education and the needs for people who have followed these technical education. So in that regard, there's a disconnect indeed. And I really like the ending of the question as well, which mentions apprenticeships, which I didn't mention because there's a lot to say, honestly, but indeed, I think apprenticeships are kind of a concrete example of what I was mentioning earlier with regard to the kind of attractiveness and the perception of technical education. Because if I look, for instance, at electricians, usually you have an apprenticeship. Sometimes you don't, and it's actually not as good. So that's already something to keep in mind. But the apprenticeships are really great for preparing people to actually work. Apprentices get a wage, so I think as a student that's pretty decent. But there is an issue of attractiveness with apprenticeships themselves. There's the idea of that's what you also call dual education. Half time in the classroom, half time on the job. It's seen as a bit of a last resort option. Like, you're not good enough for school, then you go to an apprenticeship, and that really is something that needs to change. That's something that we need to value apprenticeships from a kind of perception, mindset perspective, and we also need to incentivize apprenticeships with regard to SMEs, for instance. I think you had a story earlier, right, about 5 people to install one charging point. One was an installer, the other were apprentices, right? And that's really great. It's a fun story, but for an SME, you need the capacity to train these people. You need the capacity to take on these apprentices, and in some cases we see that it's not rewarded the way it should be, and to an extent that will incentivize more and more people taking on apprentices.
Thank you, Federico. Went a bit off script here with the questions, so I'm a bit lost on the order of questions here, but maybe if we have another 5 minutes, maybe CINEA, if I can ask you, because I asked specific project that they have in Slovakia, maybe also ask this specific project to Federico. Do you also have specific European projects or initiative that you can tell us about?
Yeah, well, I will come to the first one I mentioned, actually. This is a project run by European Union, funded at least, and EUSEW is part of it, EDI. So Education for Digitalization of the Energy is important because, again, coming that the fact that there is limitation at European level. So what do? It's a societal kind of impact. You have to speak to universities in order to change the landscape for future generations to come. There are a lot of other DSOs, there are other people involved in that project, so it's quite diverse, and I think it's nice because it's really captured that kind of that you have to open up when it comes to skills in order to tackle them better. Then in terms of company-wise, we have Iberdrola, which is a very good company, but also very large in Spain. And it's a massive DSO that has also activity in the US and Latin America. And they are doing a very meticulous kind of digital skills observatory. So they really just have on a monthly basis how many people they train, on what skills, on what is the improvement, if there's upskilling or reskilling, how much hours have been spent. So really in meticulous way, it seems to have been improving quite a lot the productivity internally. So we are trying to map or to take that kind of standard for our companies represented at EUSEW. So yeah, that's
Thank you, Tseni. One last question, and I think we'll have to start concluding. About all the support that's already there by the European Union for skilling and reskilling, skills agenda, net zero, your platform. Is this enough? Someone wants to react?
Well, maybe going back to what I said earlier, is this enough? I mean, indeed there's a lot of money, but is it going to the right places, right? Is it, especially if you want to address SMEs, for instance, right? Is it going to the right places, and do they know about it? Because often case they don't know about it. They don't know that they can get funding, that they can get incentives for upskilling, reskilling. So I think there's again some awareness gap there. Maybe quickly then. Yeah.
So the money is there, but it has to be accessible.
There is money, and it's
to the right people.
It's not insignificant, but maybe that's already one question to ask, whether it's going to the right places.
Thank you all. I think maybe it's time to conclude. If you can go back to Slido, because we want to do the small exercise to compare the first word cloud that we had, and then now after 90 minutes of discussions, what are the new 3 words that's still in your mind when talking about the impact on the industrial workforce? Can see people are typing. I can still see 2 people typing. Let's give them a few more seconds. Here we go. I think we already have a clear view. Funding opportunities and money. Funding and money would be, I suppose, the same word. We'll do the exercise. We need to have the 2 words next to each other. Maybe not now, but very, very interesting. We didn't talk so much about fundings, but it's a lesson that we can take from today's session. Well, thank you all. I think they deserve a round of applause for joining. And people are still popping up. So I suppose the slides, we will correct them. And sorry for that, Alex. They will be available as well as the recording of the meeting for everyone soon. Thank you. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.